Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So, yesterday we had Ready Up, the longest Ready Up that has ever existed, I believe. A 4-hour-long stream from the developers talking about the changes to the trait system / introducing, the specialization system. And so, first of all, they talked to us about many of the changes. They clarified some things people didn't know from the blog posts. And then they went through every single trait, minor and major, for every single specialization for every single class. This is why it took 4 hours. They actually had the third seat of their panel on Ready Up was a rotating dev. They tried to get devs who actually worked on the changes themselves and made the decisions, and having that one rotating slot actually helped keep John Peters and Grouch kind of fresh because they were there the whole time. So I could do a very, very, very extensive summary for you guys that was also 4 hours long, looking at every change they made to every trait. We're not going to do that. I'm actually going to do a separate video discussing specifically the Elementalist changes, what I think they did well and what I think they did wrong, basically my feedback on how I think the Elementalist class is going to work after this video. But for now, let's just have a look at a few key things we learned from this live stream, and in particular some of the announcements that they made and my favorite changes across the various classes. Now, over the 4 hours, I would say a good amount of it was the devs continuously rehashing that everything is work in progress and it's not finished. I actually think they banged on about this a little bit too much, frankly. We can obviously see, like, a lot of the art isn't in place. The mock-up we got from the original blog post showed actual little icons that represented the traits, and I'll talk about those more in just a second. While here we just got, the generic ones that we currently have in game, just Roman numerals representing what trait number things are. So, a lot of it is work in progress, and specifically when something absurd was talked about, some number was way off, they kept saying it's work in progress, numbers can change. I do think, on the one hand, yes, they do need to stress this, and that's why I'm stressing it to you guys as well, that a lot of the stuff here can change, but on the other hand, you can't stifle all criticism that was coming in, and this is Twitch chat, obviously, you could read, it was very volatile, people spit some complete nonsense out there, but you can't silence all the criticism by saying, oh, it's work in progress. Yes, this may not be its final implementation, but the concept you are playing with, the generic idea, for example, at one point they said Mesmer, they didn't find the idea of letting your clones and phantasms die to be healthy gameplay, and they were trying to phase that out. Now, I'm not one way or the other for this specific decision they made. However, I can see players out there who just do not agree with that philosophy, okay? And so, yeah, you absolutely can criticize this kind of thing. You can say, oh, no, I think the flavor of this build should absolutely still exist, and you're kind of killing it. So, yes, it's work in progress. Don't get too offended by stuff here. I'll talk about some of the things that I was at least offended by anyway. Another cool little thing as well, the original mock-up we had of water attunement unlocking, which I'll throw on the screen now, funnily enough, had extra skills on it, or extra icons on there, then we actually end up, if you take the first 3 as minors, that's 3, then you got 3 adept, 3 master, 3 grandmaster. Don't we have 4 or 3 extra icons here? That's kind of curious. Maybe it's just because at one point someone mentioned this to me on Reddit. Maybe the idea is that they originally were going to have 4 choices at each selection or something. But yeah, kind of curious. And I like that one of those as well, by the way, is a healing potion or like an energy potion. Same icon as we saw a long time ago. Anyway, moving on. Solid information we got, first of all, about unlocking stuff. They said in the original blog post that a character who was level 80 would have enough hero points to create a few full builds, and then they said, if you had world completion as well, you'd be able to make everything. So they gave us specifics. They said that, in essence, you only need to complete 60 hero challenges, or 60 skill points, skill challenges around the world, in addition to being level 80, to unlock everything. So, as a baseline, there's around 200 skill points interior at the moment. You only need to get 60 of those and be level 80 to have absolutely everything in the entire game. And this obviously makes sense to the casual audience that Guild Wars 2 has. They don't want to force me, they don't want to make stuff difficult. Again, this is where I, as a player, would make a different decision that people wouldn't agree with. I think it kind of sucks that it's so easy, because it means that how many more elite specializations are they going to have to add to the game before I start caring about skill points again, This does mean that any hero challenges they add in Heart of Thorns, I do not care about. I get nothing out of those whatsoever unless I have a level 80 character I've just rushed to the jungle, which I can guarantee you isn't happening, even with my Revenant. So, and then what about the next expansion? Yes, they may add another elite specialization, but I still have an excess of like 160 hero points even after Heart of Thorns. Maybe elite specializations will cost way more hero points to fully unlock than regular specializations, core specializations, but I don't know. Anyway, I think this is going to be something people are very happy with. They did give us more specific numbers. They said it's going to cost you 300 points to buy all the specialization lines. It's 5 points per skill, so then there's about 100 points to buy all of the skills. So it's going to cost you about 460 to get everything, and you get 400 of those points just from leveling up, okay? And then you get the last 60 from doing hero challenges. So that's the implementation there on the unlocking side of things. Other generic changes, big questions people had about conditions. There was a lot of stuff about conditions here. First of all, they were asked at one point, hey, what's happening condition duration? What's happening to boon duration? Boon duration they glossed over, though there was a little bit of a mention of it with Mesmer. I think the only trait I saw in the entire game after this overhaul in the current implementation is Mesmer's in Chaos, in the Chaos line. They have a trait that will increase boon duration by a fairly substantive amount, as far as I remember. Otherwise, we haven't seen anything or heard anything about boon duration. For condition duration, it was specifically said that we won't build, it doesn't sound like we'll build condition duration on gear anymore, except, you know, the random gear that might still exist, like givers. They never mentioned anything about givers stuff. But when there are traits that would increase the potency of a condition or its condition duration, those traits still exist, and they are going to be themselves more potent. So currently you might have a trait that says burns last longer, like elementalists do, and it's like 25% longer. After the change, you know, traits like this may be more effective, and it may be 40% longer or something. Then combined with your koi cake, you're already at 80%. The cap is only 100% anyway right now, so I don't actually think things will change too much there. As well, though, there were some more clarifications on the condition and boon system. First of all, taunt is a condition. As you guys, if you've been watching me quite regularly recently, I mentioned, like, in 2 videos back-to-back that taunt was a condition, like, last week. And I had people saying to me, oh, how can you get this right? For God's sake, you know, this is it's an effect, not a condition. And I believe that this came about because in one of the demos, Condi Cleanse wasn't working, but stun breaks were working. But I mean, the art has always clearly shown it as a condition. The initial blog post, while it never used the term condition, clearly, again, made it sound like a condition. But last week, I went back and I said, oh, no, okay, guys, I was wrong, actually. It's an effect. No, taunt is a condition. Taunt can be impacted by condition duration. Taunt can be Condi Cleansed, okay? In addition, also, they are changing quickness into a boon, and we got to see the new quickness icon there. So this is actually an additional boon added to the list with resistance, for example, that we hadn't heard about before. So now quickness can be a little bit more available to players, and also there is the counterplay of being able to strip it. So this is pretty interesting. I wonder whether they're going to change the way time warp works to just apply like a flat ton of quickness on people so they can walk out of it, or whether it's going to be very short duration and refreshing a lot so it can't be stripped. That'll be an interesting distinction they make there. I think I'm like 90% confident it will be the latter of those scenarios. So that's a change. And then lastly, it started as very in your face hinting, and then it got even worse and worse and worse and worse. It's pretty much confirmed at this point, unless things change. Both poison and burning are going to be stacking in intensity, not duration, after this change goes in the game. And again, this is before Heart of Thorns. This was also very much confirmed in the live stream. These changes will be before Heart of Thorns. I wasn't just spitting that out. I kind of knew this from the email we got last week. But yeah, they have confirmed that on the stream. This is before Heart of Thorns. It's just the elite specializations that come in with Heart of Thorns. And so this could be the Condi change here too. Condis, therefore, when Heart of Thorns has released, are going through numerous changes. The caps seem like they're being removed, and now we have poison and burning stacking intensity. If you're a little out of the loop here, currently, if I burn a foe and then I burn a foe again, it just increases the duration of that burning, not how much damage it does. So it's different to bleeds. Well, now this will also stack in intensity. They did confirm then with this change, the base damage on burning is probably going to be lowered. Now, I wouldn't expect it then to be on par with bleeding, for example. There have to be distinctions between various conditions, and so I think, and burn is ultimately a little bit harder to apply anyway than bleeds, so I think burn will just have a higher base damage. Poison also will be stacking intensity. I'm guessing that the reduction in healing effectiveness will still be a function of poison, but again, the base damage will probably be lowered just a little bit, and now if you apply a whole ton of poison, then this will stack in intensity too. And so when you look at some of the changes they've made, I won't be going into massive detail on them, but for like Thief, you can see the Deadly Arts line, they've made a lot to do with poison and poison application, and so when you see loads of poison application overlapping in the current game, you think, oh, this is pretty much terrible, especially in PvP, because who cares if you can put 2 minutes of poison on someone if they can just cleanse it with a single skill. Well, now it's not going to be 2 minutes of poison, it's going to be shorter duration, it's going to be hitting really hard, so that's a change. Then further, there does seem to be some kind of a change to confusion damage. I don't know exactly what they're talking about here. The base damage on confusion seems to be lower, and I think it's detailing 2 different numbers on confusion damage now. I haven't really read any speculation people have done on how this could work, and I have very little of an idea for myself either, so that'll be interesting to see how they change that. If it ends up feeling a lot more like empathy, like Backfire from GW1, which were my favorite skills, Price of Failure, these kinds of skills, I'll be very happy, but I don't know whether that's the angle that they're going for. So those are changes to the Condi system. Moving on, other big things that were announced in the stream. This thing we saw again with Elementalist, like unlocking stuff. We saw Tempest appeared as something we could put hero points into. I believe that Tempest was just going to be a new classification of Elementalist skill, that they were going to put Ether Renewal and Tornado, the 2 Elementalist skills that don't currently have classifications, into, and then it would get its own traits and stuff. Arena aren't doing that. They're actually just trying to shoehorn all traits into the existing classes. So Ether Renewal doesn't really fit any class of Elementalist skill, and I suspect this is why it wasn't given a class of Elementalist skill at launch. For example, they were saying on the stream that it could become a cantrip. Cantrips are defined by being instant activation. It's the opposite of instant activation. It's one of the longest casting skills, and interrupting Ether Renewal is like one of the core components and counterplay to the ability. So it really doesn't fit there. It's clearly not a signet. It doesn't give you something as a passive. It's clearly not a conjure weapon. It doesn't drop something on the floor and put something in your hand at the same time, and it's clearly not a glyph. It doesn't have a different effect based on the attunement you're in. It doesn't fit any of their classifications, and so this is why I thought that they were going to create a new skill class, Tempest, and then it would become a Tempest thing, just as Tornado fits very well as a Tempest thing. That's not what they're doing. They're going to try and shoehorn it in, and Tempest is, in fact, the name of the Elementalist specialization. The first elite specialization for Elementalists will be Tempest. So we're going to have Tempests and Elementalists in the game. Tempest, you'll have your own like skill icon, you'll have access to a new weapon, probably sword. Again, can I just point out that we had a little bit of speculation sword was coming to the class. Tempest is about storms and stuff. What is the legendary sword? Oh yeah, it's Bolt, right? That kind of makes sense. So Tempest is the new elite specialization. They also revealed that next week we will be getting the first reveal of a Guild Wars 2 specialization, and it is not Druid. So will it be Tempest? I think maybe, since they've done everything so Ellie focused lately, and that'll be kind of cool to see, but it could be any of them except Druid or Revenant. It's not going to be the Revenant one either, so because that would just be crazy if they gave us the Revenant specialization before the Revenant itself. Yeah, kind of bonkers. To go back to the idea of skills getting classes, the devs seemed really clueless on this. It seemed like they'd done very little internal discussion on the idea before. I'm not actually offended by this idea. You know, there were a lot of places actually where devs were blanking on the names of traits or even just very basic skills and stuff, and that can be kind of disheartening to see. You know, you want them to be as expert at your class as you feel like you are. You know, I feel like a player that mains wholly Guardian and then sees the dev isn't totally perfect about one thing, it's probably going to be a little bit disappointed, but I do like what they're doing. I do like that they're talking to us and being more open, and you know, these are human beings. They're not going to know everything all of the time, and at the end of the day, it's either this or it's the crazy radio silence until everything is completely set in stone. You know, on this live stream, there was a lot of engineer stuff that was amazing and new that we got to see. There's also a lot of stuff that was kind of up in the air. They didn't even have ideas for a lot of the traits there. Still, I prefer this, and I would hope people don't get, you know, too offended if it sounds like they don't really know what they're doing. I would say, though, with the skills becoming like classifications, existing ones not making new skill types, seems really clunky. Like, sometimes it fits vaguely, sometimes they can make changes to make it fit more suitably, but a lot of the time it just doesn't make sense, and balance-wise, they're going to have, you know, a lot of stuff to deal with. For example, when they were looking at what they can make Healing Breeze on the Guardian, they were like, oh, this can become a shout. Okay, it sort of very vaguely fits as a shout. And it's like, oh, do we make Shelter like a consecration? And, you know, if they just automatically did that and it got access to all the consecration traits and stuff, it's a terrifying thought. So they're going to have a lot of work to do there. Some more little things that I did manage to peel over the 4 hours. They did confirm that the new skill trait icons that we saw again in that Elementalist mock-up, these will actually be the things that appear over active effects. So, to be clear, when you're, say, playing with a ranger, and that ranger has Spotter, increases the precision of all nearby allies, you get appearing next to your boons and stuff, and the boons all look quite flush, and they're all artistically consistent and stuff. You get appearing next to them this very ugly, like, square-shaped box with a Roman numeral inside it, and it looks placeholder and it looks terrible. Well, under the new system, because there are less traits and all of them are getting their own artwork, after this you will then actually get the image of that trait appeering there, which is kind of cool. It does sort of stand a little in defiance to the way the boon system was designed. Like, the boon system was supposed to be, okay, we're not going to have hexes or enchantments. We're not going to have so many specific effects going off, all with their own icons that players all have to learn and be able to mouse over during battle and stuff. We don't want that. We want a unified set so that you can easily tell at any moment, you know, through these core boons and these core conditions what's going on. And now we're kind of getting the hexes / enchantment side of thing coming back a bit more now, because now all these trait things will get proper icons. But we've been in that situation anyway, and this is just far more readable and my preferred system. So that's what we'll get. We'll have our own special Spotter icon and anything else. So our active effects should be looking a lot better once the actual change goes through. Also, there's a bunch of new traits that actually do have more active effects like this rolling around now. So I wonder whether they'll start appearing on their own line or whether they'll still be jumbled in with boons. We'll see. Couple of dumb little UI things that I really liked. Number one, we did get to see that the new UI for unlocking stuff will appear as a new selectable thing in the hero panel. You guys should be able to see that right now. And the other really cool thing was that as you unlock things, the art in the background actually slowly saturates with color. Like, a lot of it's work in progress and we didn't have much art at all, but they at least showed this. And I was like, this is such a superficial, dumb thing to care about, but I was like, this is so cool. This is the best thing ever. Also, a general new thing they're doing with traits across all professions is if you ever had a trait that procced something, it's now being changed to not be proccing like its own thing. It will actually be activating utility skills. Alright, so for example, Elementalists, when they get very low on health, they have a trait that says activate an Arcane Shield. Arcane Shield is one of your utility skills, and this would give you access to that basically without having to slot it on your bar. And so when the Arcane Shield procs, that can then actually trigger other traits you have, such as, gain increased ferocity after you've used an arcane skill. And so across a lot of classes, there's actually potential for this to happen. So look at Necromancer. Necromancer had a trait that inflicted bleeding and weakness on foes when you entered Death Shroud. Or it had a trait that was, when you take full damage, create a poison field around you. Well, now it's when you take full damage, actually cast the skill Corrosive Poison Cloud. And so any traits that interact with that utility skill will then have that further synergy. And that's everywhere. So Guardian has a new trait where it will proc Smite Condition after you use your heal skill. And then because you've used Smite Condition, it will proc a bunch of other traits that affect that. And so they kind of did this across the board. If that makes sense to you guys, it's actually really important. And it does, again, open up a lot more cool little synergies we should be able to do. Again, another example actually I had written down here was Rangers will be casting their Warhorn 5 weapon skill when they weapon swap, and it literally is that weapon skill, so they'll get the blast and stuff on weapon swap, which is pretty crazy. There was no word whatsoever as to what is happening to racial skills. I was really hoping this will be addressed. It was not. The nightmare, the fear, is that they are removing racial skills, and considering an engineer change, which I'm jumping the gun a little bit telling you guys about, they actually will now get on their utility belt, you know, their F1, F2, F3, F4, those skills, they're actually getting an F5 now, an entirely new skill. That's why we've got Profession 5th skill has appeared in our options in the game clients for a while. That's engineers will now be getting an F5 ability, and depending on the elite they have equipped, this will change. And so that sounds like a cool change, but also consider that many racial abilities are elite. So right now, for example, if you play an engineer Norn, there's only actually 2 racial skills you can add that you will then get tool belt skills from. Well, now there's going to be tons more. Are they really going to design for every racial skill a new tool belt skill? Or did they decide to cut racial skills completely, and then because racial skills were cut completely, they decided, okay, we can also add an F5 to engineer? To me, it sounds more like the latter, which I don't like at all. I want racial skills to be a thing. You guys saw in my top 10 feature pack 3, if there ever was one, request. You saw that this is what I wanted. I wanted actual balance brought to these skills to make them a function of gameplay. They could have just decided, they're useless right now, we're going to get rid of them, which would suck. Okay, so that's pretty much the core stuff. I'm not going to say too much more. Elementalists, I'm going to leave all my thoughts, again, for a specific video on them, and I'll talk to you guys exactly how they've set up those traits and what I think is going to be strong, what's going to be weak. One very notable thing, though, is that Ice Bow and Conjure Lightning Hammer sound like they are going to be nerfed. I kind of agree with the Ice Bow nerf, because it's always felt like it was designed to be a weapon that was more supporty, and I would like to see its support capabilities be buffed and the Ice Storm damage be nerfed, even though it's incredibly fun to blow stuff up with Ice Bow, I get it. But Lightning Hammer I don't think deserves a nerf at all. We don't see this be played anywhere except in PvE, and even there it's not 100% of the time better than other options like Staff, which is way more basic to play. Please don't kill a Lightning Hammer. Lightning Hammer needs buffs so that it actually sees viability in PvP and World vs. World, not nerfs, because it's sometimes used in PvE. You kill both of these, you're going to kill a lot of variety for Ellie specs, in addition to other changes, but again, I'll do those in another video. Moving on, Thief, again, has a bunch of poison stuff. They even have a new trait, 50% more damage from poison, and again, because of the stacking intensity, this could add some new stuff for Condi Thieves. A change I hated the sound of is that the Venom, like, trait that would increase the amount of Venoms that pop is becoming baseline. That means that Bassy Venom is now going to be loading on 2 for every single Thief. I hate this change. One of the core counterplays to Bassy Venom Thieves was being able to blind them so that they'd miss that Bassy Venom proc. Well, screw you now, players that actually managed to get that blind off. It doesn't matter. The Thief can just try a backstab, oh, I missed, and then just do another one. Or in any weapon set at all that they're running Bassy Venom. Hate the change. I think it really, really reduces the dynamics between fighting Thieves, and playing one just became a hell of a lot more face roll. I think it sucks. They did talk about a new trait, which sounds kind of interesting. I'm not sure how viable it would be. But improvisation is now actually going to let you use stolen items twice now, which is kind of crazy. They also now get access to resistance, so this is one I'll give you guys every example of a new boon or something being added to a core specialization of an existing class. So Thieves will be getting resistance. There's a trait that gives it to them when they hit someone who's on full health. So you can kind of engage on someone, and you'll know you'll be safe with resistance for a while, and that's going to help Thieves a lot more fight the Condi matchups, which they're not always perfect with. Moving over to Guardians, the main thing I had to note that I thought was really dumb here is you're going to be contesting between 2 Grandmasters, guys. You're going to be contesting against Burn does more damage, and again, Condi Guard, now that Burn stacks intensity is maybe going to be slightly more viable. Okay, so you can go for the Burn does more damage trait, but what's the other complementing trait that would be really nice if we could take? Well, that weird condition damage is now the thing that affects retaliation, but oh, they're still contesting for one another in the same Grandmaster slot. So not only is the idea of a Condi Guard still being crippled, but the idea of should a Condi Guard actually be viable being like an interesting, unique way of doing Condi, because retaliation is a function of it, also cannot exist because you can't take both at once, which is, again, so stupid. If I'm missing something major, please, someone leave a comment and convince me otherwise that this is a good change. The other thing I didn't like about Guardians was, right now, when you look at, and again, there's no place for it in the game, okay, but when you look at the idea of a healing power Guardian versus a healing power Elementalist, the core difference between them is Guardian can get, despite, you know, the way that the skills proc and their actual physical ability to drop heals on people, there's actual identity in the stat differences between them. Elementalists heal people a lot through benevolence and through percentage-based increase to healing effectiveness, while Guardians can stack higher healing power, the actual stat itself, especially when you consider they can pick up an Ice Bow that an Elementalist may have dropped. So that was like some cool identity between the two classes' ability to play healing. Well, now Guardians get their own benevolence, so that identity's kind of been removed. It's not a huge deal, but it was kind of sucky to me. And lastly, this I thought was pretty cool, the Glacial Heart trait. They thought didn't really fit because it applied chill, and chill wasn't really something Guardians did. Well, now that will inflict slow, which still, you know, is thematically very similar. And the original name for this trait was Hammer Time, which is insane. Please keep Hammer Time. That's such a cool trait name. Moving on to Engineer. Engineer had some insanely awesome differences. First of all, there are no more hobo sacks. So if you equip a grenade kit now, instead of putting this big backpack on you, your character will actually be holding like a bundle of grenades in their hands. It looks so awesome. So you can now still visually tell when someone's in one of these kits better than you could before even, and they each have their own unique thing. So bomb kit, for example, you're actually holding a bomb in front of you, so it's much more visually distinct. There's going to be easier to counterplay, I guess, or more obvious to players while fighting engineers. It's got way better flavor, and you get to keep your back pieces there. I just think it's awesome. The cherry on top for this change is that they announced the existing hobo sacks just become back pieces for us to craft in the Mystic Forge. Then everyone everywhere is happy, and that's going to be brilliant. Even beyond this as well, there have been functional changes to engineer stuff. As I said, they get their F5 now. They also get some differences to medkit. The medkit 1 now will actually allow you to like shoot heals at people, like a beam heal thing you can shoot people with. There's the ability to give people quickness on the skill 3, which again is really awesome, like really awesome, and again probably possible because quickness is now a boon and there's a bit more counterplay to it. And there's like some kind of a buffing pylon, this new thing that you can drop. It's not quite like a turret or gadget kind of thing, but you drop it down and then that's going to give people benefits. That's really cool. Lastly, because mortar is now becoming a kit, again for the reasons we established earlier, it's actually now no longer a stationary thing. So the skill, I feel, has lost a lot of its flavor. I think I would have preferred to have seen them like just buff the mortar massively and, you know, change the way that the stability is applied instead of just giving you tons of stability or like infinite stability on it, just lots of short little pulses so it can't be stolen, and actually make it stronger. Like that was a really interesting skill before and skill idea. Well, they just got rid of the idea entirely. Now it's a kit we actually run around holding the mortar. Mortar is becoming like the really long range DPS option instead of grenades. Grenades are being nerfed down to 900 range, which is lower than they've ever been, and while mortar will then take that really long distance field dropping kind of approach, and so it could actually have place now. And the F5 for mortar, by the way, is basically like a mini Skyhammer strike. Like it actually charges at like an orbital laser beam, comes down and blows stuff up. So that's pretty awesome also. So lots of changes for engineers. Their Elixir X F5 is actually throw Elixir X at the moment, and it mowers people that it hits, but this is very work in progress and may not actually be there in the game in the end. Moving on from Engineer, we had Mesmer. The guy designing Mesmer actually did some design work on GW1, and it kind of feels like they're pushing it back to a bit more GW1-ish. Domination Magic was my favorite line in the first game, my favorite attribute line. I really like a lot of what they did with Domination Magic here, and most importantly, there's tons of interrupt-based stuff on Mesmer, like tons of it now, and I'd love to see like that kind of interrupter role actually come back and be a thing. Like they are really incentivizing it, and that looks very cool. They also made Deceptive Evasion a Grandmaster trait. This I'm really happy about, really happy about. Number one, because they've described Grandmasters now as, when you slot a Grandmaster, it's supposed to feel like a game-changing thing, you know, something that really impacts the way your character plays. And of all the Mesmer traits out there, Deceptive Evasion has always been one that's felt that way. You know, it changes things dramatically when you have Deceptive Evasion on. The other thing I've never really liked about Deceptive Evasion, as someone, you know, just watching PvP scene, watching anything really, is I really feel like it makes it messy watching combat with the constant clones coming out and dodge roll everywhere. And so just now that it's a Grandmaster, it may mean we see a little bit less of it. It's still very much viable and it's possible to run because we can see Grandmasters a little bit differently now. As you know, it's not really spending points anymore. It's not like we have to go deeper in. We just kind of get it if we go for that line. It's only in contention against the other two Grandmasters in that slot. And I just like the idea that there's going to be a little bit less of this around, and it's just it just fits as a Grandmaster. I know many Mesmers will see that as like a horrible nerf, but I think it's a really smart change, They, the Necro Downstate trait, as we all know, was fixed recently and just became ridiculous. It's getting nerfed to 25% more damage while down, which is still pretty substantive, so that's fine. They actually nerfed, in my opinion, minion builds a little. I've discussed before at great length about why minions taking conditions from their minion master is actually a bad trait and gets your minions killed quicker. Well, that is now actually on the same trait as the one that increases Necro minion damage, so you can't take them separately anymore, and I actually do see that as a little bit of a nerf. They did seem to make Vampire a little bit stronger, and the very cool thing about Necro now as well is Doomfire has its own art. So your skill 1 while you were in Death Shroud will actually look different. It will look like it's kind of on fire, which is very cool. Ranger changes. Longbow got even more of a buff because now Velocity, the thing that makes them shoot quickly, is baseline, while the trait Read the Wind, which is now called Lead the Wind, actually increases your attack speed by 10%. 50%, so they're even stronger. I'm also a little bit sad that that velocity thing's been rolled into baseline, because I honestly thought that was one of the coolest traits to slot. Like, you really got to see it impact your skills in a big way, and we're not going to have that there anymore. It's just going to be, oh, this is my longbow, this is how it's always felt. They also changed the way traps work. Traps are probably going to get buffed a little, but now they actually have a bit more counterplay to them, because when they get thrown down, they have to take some time to arm. So when you're fighting against a trap ranger, which aren't in particular abundance anywhere, I agree, but when you're fighting against one, you actually get to see them throw it down, and then you have time to move away or dodge to proc it at the perfect moment and so forth. So there's going to be more counterplay to it, and because there's more counterplay, I'm expecting them to get something of a buff, and it'll be really cool if we do see them become meta again now, because that'll be a fun spec to play as and against. They have a funny trait where if you, the ranger, are above 90% health, your pet takes 50% less damage, so that's really going to trivialize a lot of PvE stuff where the AI is too dumb to retarget, and like you run around with a bear, and the bear is ridiculously tanky. Colin walked in on the stream at some point, and they did confirm that taunt is coming as a trait, which means any pet who uses their F2 will taunt foes around them, which is pretty much the perfect way they can do that. Last of all, we've got Warrior. The only things I really cared about with Warrior was there is a new functionality to physical skills that make them more potent when you have high endurance. That doesn't mean they do more damage, it just means their effects are more exaggerated. So Stomp, for example, AoE blows out everyone around you. If you have high endurance as a warrior now, when you use Stomp, it will throw people further away, but you will be able to knock people down for longer with Bull's Rush, for example. That's why you're at high endurance. There is also a trait that increases physical skills damage based on the adrenaline you have, and if you have tier 3 adrenaline, that's 150% damage boost. Now, this is a very big number, but also consider, you know, physical utility, they only really hit once, right? So you can get like some massive stomp, right? If you've got max endurance, max adrenaline, you come in and you stomp, you're going to get really, really cool effect. This is made even more interesting though, because where they're classifying all skills as types, Rampage is becoming a physical skill, and so then you're going to have 150% more damage while in Rampage at full adrenaline, which really will push Rampage not just into this highly durable tanky kind of role, but and high CC as it is right now as well, but actually a real threat on the field as well. Now, they may nerf its base abilities just to account for this trait, but we really could see physical warriors becoming a thing there too, so that's going to be pretty interesting. That's the main stuff. That's my too long didn't watch. That's 4 hours condensed down into about half an hour. Hope you guys enjoyed. Do feel free to check out what I have to say about Ellie coming up very shortly, and until then, I hope you guys have a great evening. Let me know what you think about what they announced, and I guess I will see you next time.